Ready to dive into one of the most iconic speeches in American history.
Oh, absolutely. Always up for a deep dive into I Have a Dream.
This speech is so powerful. But I think to really appreciate it, we got to understand the context. Like we're talking 1963, the civil rights movement is facing some serious pushback.
Yeah, you're right. You think about the violence in Birmingham just months before. Images of police dogs attacking peaceful protesters, even children.
It was a turning point for a lot of Americans.
Hmm.
And King knew he had to walk this fine line, inspire hope, but also acknowledge the anger and frustration so many were feeling.
And even some of his advisors thought the I Have a Dream section was kind of, well, tired. They actually wanted him to cut it.
Can you imagine? That iconic part almost didn't make it in.
It's crazy to think about, right? But before we get to the speech itself, let's rewind a bit. The March on Washington, this was a massive undertaking, years in the making.
Okay, so let's talk about the masterminds behind it. We have A. Philip Randolph, right? Longtime Union leader.
Yep. Randolph had actually been trying to organize a march like this since the 40s. He saw it as a way to protest job discrimination.
Wow, so this was a long time coming. And then there's Bayard Rustin, the organizer. He was a bit of a controversial figure, wasn't he?
That's an understatement. Rustin was openly gay, a socialist, a pacifist.
Yeah, not exactly mainstream in 1963 America.
Definitely not. And that made him a target. Opponents of the march tried to use his background to discredit the whole movement.
I bet. It's amazing they were able to pull it off with so much opposition.
That's a credit to Rustin. He was meticulous, anticipated every challenge, from logistics to security. He even told people not to bring mayonnaise sandwiches because they might spoil in the heat.
Okay, that's thinking ahead.
He understood the stakes. Any violence or chaos would have been used to paint the whole movement in a negative light.
So let's set the scene. August 28th, 1963. Hundreds of thousands of people converging on the National Mall. What was the vibe like?
Yeah, it must have been electric. A mix of hope, excitement, but also nervousness. Everyone knew this was a huge moment.
And it wasn't just a political rally, right? You had Bob Dylan, Joan Baez performing, celebrities like Marlon Brando, Charlton Heston showing their support.
Yeah, a real cultural moment. And the diversity of the crowd was striking. So many Black Americans, along with kids, older folks. It felt like a true grassroots movement.
And then you have King, the last speaker of the day. Talk about pressure.
Yeah, immense pressure. And to make things even tougher, the other civil rights leaders had given him a strict time limit. 10 minutes, that's all he got.
10 minutes to deliver a speech for the ages. Seriously.
Seriously, one leader even threatened to cut his mic if he went over.
Wow. So here's King, gifted orator, master of biblical cadence and imagery, and he has this meticulously prepared speech. But there's one big question mark hanging over it all.
The I Have a Dream section. Would he? Should he? It sounds like even as he stepped up to the podium, it was still up in the air.
That's wild. The part we all remember almost didn't make the cut.
It really shows you how these things can evolve, even in the moment. But you know what? That's a story for the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so last time we left off with King about to wrap up his speech at the March on Washington. He's laid out this powerful argument for equality using history, morality, that promissory note metaphor. But the clock's ticking, and he still hasn't touched the I have a dream part.
And this is where things get really interesting, because just as he's about to finish, he goes off script. He says, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
It's like a switch flips in the recordings. Everything changes. So was this spontaneous? Did he just decide to add I have a dream right there on the spot?
There's been a lot of debate about that. Some people think he was inspired by the energy of the crowd. Or maybe it was Mahalia Jackson, the gospel singer, who some say shouted, "Tell him about the dream, Martin."
I've heard that too. Either way, it's an incredible moment. He takes this leap, and suddenly the speech becomes so much more powerful.
Exactly. And notice how he ties it right back to the American dream. He says, it is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
He's not rejecting American ideals. He's saying, look, this is what you promised. Let's make it real for everyone.
Exactly. And then he starts painting these amazing pictures of what a future with equality would look like. He starts with his home state, Georgia. He talks about former slaves and slave owners sitting down together.
At the table of brotherhood, right? It's such a powerful image.
It is. And he doesn't stop there. He talks about Mississippi, this state with such a history of racism, becoming an oasis of freedom and justice.
You can hear the hope in his voice. He really believes in this vision.
He does. And then he makes it even more personal. He talks about his own kids. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Oof, that line gets me every time. Every parent wants that for their children, to be judged fairly.
Exactly. It's universal. And King connects his dream to the dreams of everyone listening.
And the crowd is right there with him. You can feel it building.
Yeah. And King, he's a master of this, right? He senses that energy and he just rides it. His voice gets stronger and he keeps repeating, I have a dream today.
Like a preacher with his congregation, everyone's caught up in the moment.
Right. And then, this is brilliant, he connects this vision to something even bigger, something ancient.
He quotes the prophet Isaiah.
Yes, he talks about a time when every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
Wow. It's like he's saying this fight for equality isn't just politics, it's a holy mission.
Exactly. For King, his faith was everything. He truly believed God was on the side of justice.
And even though he's gone off script, he's still weaving in those themes of faith. It's incredible how he brings it all together.
And then, get this, he starts talking about My Country, 'Tis of Thee, that patriotic song. You know the melody is actually the same as God Save the King.
Wait, seriously? I had no idea.
Yep. It's like he's reclaiming that song for the movement, saying, hey, these ideals, they belong to us too.
That's amazing. And then comes that unforgettable part where he talks about freedom ringing from all across America.
Let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania.
He paints such a vivid picture.
And then he goes south. Stone Mountain of Georgia, Lookout Mountain of Tennessee, every hill and molehill of Mississippi, north, south, everywhere. It's this vision of a unified nation transformed by his dream.
It's like this incredible crescendo.
And then he brings it all back to the text he had prepared, ending with, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It's perfect. The planned and the unplanned. The personal and the universal. The crowd goes wild. People are cheering, crying. It's just powerful.
Even President Kennedy, who was watching on TV, was apparently stunned.
But as amazing as that moment was, the impact of the speech wasn't immediate. It took time for it to really sink in. That's right. We've been talking about that incredible moment on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. King delivering, I have a dream. But like you were saying, the impact wasn't instant, right?
Right. It's tempting to think, oh, this speech changed everything. But things are more complicated than that.
So what was the immediate reaction then?
I mean, it got some good press, but it wasn't like, boom, instant revolution. The civil rights movement, it still had a long way to go.
Makes sense. Change takes time, right? Plus, I bet there was still a ton of pushback against King's message.
Oh, yeah. Especially in certain parts of the country. Some newspapers even made fun of the whole thing. Like one printed a picture of trash left behind after the march.
Seriously?
Yeah. The headline was, Washington is clean again with Negro trash removed.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's just awful. Really shows how divided the country was.
Exactly. And even within the civil rights movement, not everyone was on board with King's approach.
So he was getting criticism from all sides.
Pretty much. There was this new generation of activists. They were getting impatient. They felt like King was too focused on winning over white people. Not radical enough, you know?
Like Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, the Black Power movement.
Yeah, they wanted a more confrontational approach.
And for a lot of people, King's dream was starting to feel kind of, well, out of reach. Like integration wasn't going to solve everything.
Exactly. King himself started to realize this. He gave a speech in Chicago a few years later, and people were actually hostile towards him.
Wow, really?
Yeah, especially young black men. He later wrote that they felt like the dream was turning into a frustrating nightmare.
That's so sad. Even as King kept fighting for things like economic justice, ending the Vietnam War, that message of hope, it wasn't resonating the same way anymore.
Right, so it makes you wonder, would we even be talking about I Have a Dream today if not for King's assassination?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say for sure, right?
Impossible. But I do think his death definitely played a role in how we remember the speech.
Yeah. King became this symbol, a martyr for the movement. And I Have a Dream, it was easy to understand. It had these powerful images, universal themes. It became kind of a shorthand for his whole legacy.
Right, and after such a senseless tragedy, people were looking for meaning, for hope.
I have a dream. provided that.
It did. But in a way, it also simplified things. People focused on this one speech and kind of forgot about King's later ideas, the stuff about economic inequality, systemic change.
So when we talk about I Have a Dream today, how should we think about it?
I think it's both inspiring and challenging. It shows how powerful words can be, but we also need to remember the whole picture. King's legacy is way more complex than just this one speech.
Yeah. It's about the struggle for justice, a struggle that's still going on today.
Exactly. It's about confronting uncomfortable truths, challenging systems of oppression, fighting for the idea that everyone deserves dignity and respect.
So I Have a Dream is this powerful testament to the human spirit, but it's also a call to action, to make that dream a reality.
Exactly. And to do that, we gotta keep questioning, keep pushing for a better world. Like King said, the time is always right to do what is right.
Great place to end it, I think.
Yeah.
And for our listeners out there, I hope this deep dive into I Have a Dream has inspired you to learn more, to get involved. There's still so much work to do to make King's vision a reality. But together, I truly believe we can make a difference.